Welcome to Mooney Reads. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a reading check-in. I think I want to go from the monthly wrap-ups, which I was not, towards the end of last year, I was kind of inconsistently doing them, but that's what I end up doing a lot. Rather than doing that, I think I want to do it a little more frequently. I don't know what it's going to look like. Overall, I might change my mind. But my current thoughts are doing bi-monthly, so twice a month. And this would be the mid-January check-in. Is a little bit past mid-January, but not by very much. So I'm going to talk about the 4 books that I finished so far this month, and a little bit about some of the stuff that I'm in the middle of as well. I started off the year by finishing a story collection that I was in the middle of, Meet Behind Mars by Renee Sims. I got this from the library sometime last year. It's not one that I've really seen around before, but the cover was really compelling. And I picked it up, and it was pretty good. I think I might just have more mixed feelings about certain types of literary fiction in short story form, because I also had kind of mixed feelings about Her Body and Other Parties when I read it last year. And this one is a little less speculative than Her Body and Other Parties, but it is literary fiction that looks at a lot of different things. A lot of them surround relationships and kind of the Black experience. There are quite a few things involving school and racism in that particular setting, but also additional themes kind of within those stories. Some of them having to do with things like memory. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. But I think my problem with some short stories that are really thematically packed like that is that either they are almost too forward with the theme and it feels a little awkward, or it's not forward enough and I've got to sit for a while before thinking of what the themes might have been. And I think that if they were in a longer form, more could have been done with them a lot of the time. That being said, these were really well written. I think in some short story collections, I feel like it's not uncommon to see stuff that feels like it's not really been refined. I didn't get that feeling with these. They're very well written, and I found the characters really compelling despite it, being a shorter format. So this was a really good collection. I just am not sure that I personally liked some things about it, but if you're the person who really likes more short stories like that, you'd probably really like this one. After that, I read For Black Trans Girls Who Gotta Cuss a Motherfucker Out When Snatching an Edge Ain't Enough by Dane Figueroa Edidi. And this is a self-published poetry collection that I actually started last year. This is a riff on Ntozake Shange's For Colored Girls Who've Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And my plan was to read that, watch it, and then read this. And I got the first 2 steps, but not quite this last step. So I restarted it this year, and it was really excellent. I love that it plays into this kind of longer literary tradition in that way, while also, I think in another way, playing in or being a part of a larger tradition. It also talks about spirituality, particularly African, and I think specifically Yoruba spirituality. It is framed like a ritual, and then you're getting kind of these different characters and these different experiences of trans womanhood. There's also a lot in here about history, and how the way that history is viewed is very whitewashed and fucked up. There are also a lot of conversations that are happening in here kind of within different communities, within the Black community or within the trans community. This does talk about a lot of traumatic things, but there's also a fair amount of humor that's infused throughout a lot of this, which I really appreciated. There were just a lot of layers and a lot of really reasons that I enjoyed this, so would definitely recommend it to poetry readers. After that, I read Other Ever Afters, New Queer Fairy Tales by Melanie Gilman. Last year, I read Stage Dreams by Melanie Gilman and really liked it. That one was like a cute small adventure, but with lots of attention to detail, and with a lot of like extra notes about the history and things like that. This was another one that was simple in some regards, but still really well put together. There's kind of that a similar attention to detail kind of in this collection. The intro and conclusion sort of frame this, and it's a reimagining or looking at fairy tales, but kind of giving them different morals and with queer characters or queer contexts. I thought it was really cool and I enjoyed the art. And then the last thing that I finished recently is Too Bright to See by Kyle Lukoff. This is a middle grade novel about a kid who's recently lost their uncle and is haunted by his ghost. So they're trying to figure out what this ghost is saying while also figuring themselves out a lot. And there's definitely a lot of ghosty stuff in here, but I think the main focus is more on the self-discovery. I absolutely adored this. The descriptions of gender dysphoria were very, very close to home. They're very accurate for me. I really liked a lot about this. I think the way that relationships were portrayed in a way that was very nuanced. Like, the main character and their best friend have kind of a complicated relationship because they were kind of friends, like forced proximity, kind of enemies, and then ended up finding a friendship in the middle. So I think that the way that it talks about this kind of tentativeness in a way was really interesting. And the relationship with the main character has with their mom. Their mom is not a negative character by any means, but there's definitely some loose boundaries where there maybe shouldn't be, but it's also a difficult time because her brother just died. And the main character, I think, also deals with what a lot of people, I was gonna say something about birth order, but I think that like as an older sibling, I felt this, and I suppose a lot of only children probably do as well, kind of putting a lot of pressure on themselves and stuff like that. So it has that kind of in the details really well. So there is a lot of nuance there. I will say that some of like the mystery of like decoding what the uncle was trying to say was a little predictable. I'm also not the target age audience for middle grade, so maybe it wouldn't be for the people who it was written for. And I didn't really have a problem with that either, because that kind of added to it, honestly. I don't know. If I start talking more, there are lots of different directions that I can go down, several rabbit holes just talking. But overall is that I really, really liked this, and it's definitely going to hold a special place in my heart. I have another Kyle Lukoff book, Different Kinds of Fruit, I think, that I have. I'm definitely even more excited to read that after having such a good experience with this one. In terms of reading goals and readathons and things like that, all of these, except for Other Ever Afters, were things that either I'd started to read last year or I intended to read last year, like Too Bright to See. I had checked out from the library last year. And I'm trying to kind of manage the things that were kind of that I've already started, or were supposed to have been read. So that's good. And then 3 of the 4 books that I've read so far this year went with the Queer Lit Readathons Read Queer All Year initiative. Their January prompts are Read Your Shelves, which 2 of these were already on my shelf, and they all fit in different ways to revisit the past. This one I literally started last year. I'm revisiting a book from the past. I checked this out from the library. The same logic could be used. This one I could also see for Revisit the Past because it's like revisiting and kind of redoing the idea of fairy tales, which is in the past. Now, next I'm going to talk a little bit about books that I have been reading. There are quite a few books actually that I've been looking at here and there that I can talk about. Some that I've been dipping my toes into are these dinosaur books. This one I've only really read the intro, and then this one, it's a craft book, but with each kind of sets of crafts it also tells you about the context for the dinosaur or the time that they were in, the habitat that you're creating. So it's a lot of fun. I'm thinking about trying to make a couple of things out of it because I think that would be a good time. So those are good. I've also been reading several bits and pieces of books that I started last year on a variety of topics. And I'm hoping to finish some of them up fairly soon. I think No Study Without Struggle in particular, I probably have a good chance of finishing. This looks small, but I've been going through and taking notes and sort of rereading sections, so it's a little bit longer of a read than it looks. So there are those, and then the final kind of, I guess, category of reading are my independent study or kind of classes that I put together for myself. I've got a video about that if you're interested in knowing more of what that is. And I won't talk about everything that I've read and watched for this, just because not all of it is very fun to talk about necessarily. Like a little bit of introduction to linguistics and some videos on how certain classes are being taught. But the one thing that I will talk about is Starting What's Your Pronoun? Beyond He and She by Dennis Barron. I am 3 chapters into it, something like that, 2 or 3. And this is looking at the history of pronouns, in particular looking at the historical issue of the gender-neutral pronoun, or the missing gender-neutral pronoun in the English language. And it kind of has gone through and started talking about introducing when this sort of phenomenon has been observed, and looking at all of the some of the alternatives that have been suggested, which he's got a really large collection of gender-neutral pronouns, and some of them were created as early as the 1700s, and a ton of them were made before the 1900s, so this is not new at all. And then the most recent chapter of this that I finished was about looking at the gender-neutral he and the political sphere, specifically looking at women's suffrage and how he has been used and interpreted legally. To no one's surprise, the interpretation of he is very loose legally, because when has the American legal system ever, had a really strict understanding of its own laws? Not very often. So this is really interesting. It is very kind of beginner, so this is an area that I've been studying, so I did know a fair amount of this, but some of it is new, some of the particulars, and it's neat to read about. So that's good so far. So that is my reading so far for the first half of January, and in the comments let me know what you've been reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye. It's a kitty. kitten? Who's little kitty cat? She is a kitten. Who's a kitty cat? You're so good, you're not even moving. Good little frame.